That was indeed amazing, Amal.
Thank you.
For me, it's my first time ever listening to an oud player.
Seriously?
Live.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, I haven't listened to a lot of oud music.
Oh wow, it's an honor.
Yeah, it's an honor for me.
Wow.
And that's your own composition.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of your compositions?
I try to focus on that these days.
Mm.
Especially with everything going on with the pandemic and quarantine, I have a lot more alone time. So I'm just composing a lot of songs. A lot of them aren't great, but that's why at this point, especially since I'm like a baby songwriter, it's good to just produce a lot.
Right.
And then over time you figure out what works, what doesn't work.
True. True.
But it's interesting that you say that that's the first time you heard oud in person, because it's not standard, it's not traditional, it's not classical, it's very like avant-garde.
Yeah.
So just know that.
Because I'm not a person who goes to music concerts or so I'm not somebody who really digs deep into it.
There's not a lot here anyway to begin
Absolutely, yeah. But I know, like, I have my friends who will book tickets and flights to the best concert, and they would know who is the artist. For me, I know music and I listen to music. I know music as in I do listen to music, but it's just so selective. Like if you tell me a song, okay, this is nice, I will listen to it. But I'm not someone who will go dig deeper and, okay, I like this artist, let me listen to one another. No, I'm just a very, but this was incredible. I just felt a very it was a very spiritual experience listening to you. And as I said, when we cut that, it just felt that it had so much soul in it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is it very meditative? Like, is it your form of meditation?
It is, in a way. I think the whole process of conceptualizing of something, starting to document it by writing it down, improving on it, leaving it, returning to it, continually adding to it, and then performing is like the whole process is spiritual. But definitely there's something when you're performing a piece. I think especially when I'm singing and playing, I feel it, especially then, where it's just like, I don't know, I feel like we were talking about this earlier, about how like we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And I often relate to that. Like I'll just go about my day and I'll do something and it'll feel like I'm doing the thing.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel like my essence is doing the thing. It's like, oh, physically I'm doing this thing. But when I'm singing and playing, it feels like my essence is producing that thing.
Like you're 100% there. You're mindful. You're present.
Yeah. And it's really grounding and centering.
And, yeah. That's lovely.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
It's addicting.
I'm
Definitely,
sure. Music is something, for me, I feel that it breaks barriers.
Okay.
It connects cultures and it actually dissolves differences. That's the power that music and songs have. But I think this is something even we discussed in our first conversation, that music is a language. And what I understand it, when I started thinking about it deeper, you are an artist. This is your music. And say in the audience, if there are 10 people listening to you, each one will understand this language differently.
Definitely.
I will understand it differently based on my upbringing, my circumstances, my mental health, my spiritual growth. There are so many factors, playing a role in my understanding of it. So let's not talk about that because that is, so personal to each individual. But I feel that there is always an intention when it comes to artists. There is maybe a push as to why you do that. When you're speaking that language, there's something that makes you speak that language.
Yeah.
There is maybe love, there is passion, there are so many reasons. When you perform, or even today, this piece that you did, what was your intention behind it?
It's a great question. I guess with my journey as an individual, I come from a really mixed background, right? My dad is Indo-Omani, my mom is Colombian-American. I grew up in a lot of different environments with a lot of different cultures and people. I was in Armani school. I was in the international school system. I lived in the States for like 5-6 years. Everything that I do is always trying to navigate and negotiate my identity for myself on my own terms, as opposed to something that I have to carry on as baggage.
Right.
So the way I try and approach it is like, obviously depending on the piece and the song and the context, I'm either, exploring what that means to me. I'm exploring the feelings of pressure, of questioning, of searching, of the power that comes with understanding it for myself and owning it for myself. This particular piece is about, I guess, my relationship with my ancestors in a way. So the first line is Min yusallim alayna, which literally translated means like, who is greeting us? Al-fudul biyaqtilni, which is like, the suspense is killing me. But contextually, what it means is we grow up our whole lives, we're being told about all of our relatives, our ancestors, our heritage. And if you come from one singular background, all of it makes sense, right? Because all of it is like cohesive and it all goes together and all the bits of the puzzle fit nicely and you get a nice picture.
Yeah.
But when you're as mixed as I am, or as mixed as a lot of people are, you're getting lots of pieces from different puzzles and expected to make a whole picture with it, which is impossible, right? So it puts all this extra pressure, and the song is meant to address like the early existential crisis I had at like 20 of what am I supposed to do? Like, especially as a oud player, I feel like there's so much pressure in the Arab world for me to be some kind of ambassador and to represent not just Oman, but like the Islamic world, the Arab world, all of this. And like, I'm one person, I'm one person that like doesn't even completely identify with the culture. And like, if you ask Armanis, they identify more as Armanis than as Gulf Arab or etc. Like there's so many subcategories under this umbrella. And so it just becomes this really, really expansive thing that can go on forever. And it's a lot to ask of someone to represent.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of tackling all of these layers in this little song or this little excerpt of a song.
But that is so deep.
Yeah.
It just shows the internal, I wouldn't say conflict, but the conversations that you have. Yeah. And I believe that the world that we live in today, as you said, there is so much pressure. Mm-hmm. And considering that we are on social media where we want to share what we do, who we are, that brings in more pressure.
Definitely. I think especially in a culture where it functions from more of a social perspective than an individual perspective. Yeah. I mean, in the States, you see this explosion of people on like TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and whatever, because it's this very like, oh, me, you're representing yourself. There's not the same kind of pressure.
Yeah.
And that is well suited for capitalism, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'll try not to get too political. But in Arab culture, Eastern culture, it's a very social approach to identity, to responsibility. And so I think when people are on social media, there's in this region, there's a lot of pressure to like be like the most polished, appropriate ambassador-like version of yourself. And if that feels authentic to an individual, then go for it. But it didn't feel authentic for me. I did it for a while and it felt like I was betraying something.
Yeah. And I think authentic is something that is being overused today. Each one says, be authentic, be authentic. Whereas I feel that we lack sincerity, we want to be authentic, but how sincere are we?
Right.
And sometimes I think in the chase of being authentic, we really don't know how authentic are we.
Yeah.
So I just feel like the more we are talking today, the more we put these words out. And again, because there's so much content, there's so many personalities that are coming up, which is a great thing. Like this platform gives a lot of recognition to people, like it gives you a platform to say whatever you have, whatever art you have, your talent, you can showcase.
I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for Instagram.
Exactly. But the repercussion of it is, where everybody's like, oh, but how authentic are you? But then, we even tend to be too hard on each other and even on ourselves. And we're not understanding that we're human at the end. And we will flaw. We will make mistakes. And each day is a new opportunity to learn, to become better than yesterday.
Yeah.
But we're so boggled down, with the pressure and with people's comments and everything. So I think it's a very complicated subject.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely when I was so before I was studying music, I was on track to study law. And I was at this college in the middle of Ohio, cornfield in Ohio, called Berklee College. And it was like half of the school was a college and half of the school was a conservatory, like classical Western European art music. And of course I get there and I'm only hanging out with the musicians. I'm only spending time with them. I'm only working with them. I'm playing with them. I made bands. I was good in my coursework. It was actually a lot easier than I was expecting it to be. But all of my time was dedicated to this world in the conservatory that I wasn't technically allowed to have, but I found my way to worm into it. And I made this really good friend, really great jazz sax player. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, everyone's best quality is their worst quality. If it's flipped, right? Depending on how much pressure they're in, all of that, right? Like, for example, I consider a really good quality of mine how hard I work, right? But the inverse of that is that I'm also a perfectionist. And so sometimes I don't know when to let something breathe, when to let it go, when it's ready, you know? And I think with social media, I think one of the best things about it is the exposure, which can be a really great thing or a really bad thing. It can be the anonymity.
Right.
Because at first I was posting things anonymously because I didn't know, like, what'll happen? Like, I was just like some like teenager.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I was good. I didn't know if my family would support me. So I was just kind of like posting things. And then I started getting a lot of response. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And there are I know tons of women who are like too worried about societal or family pressures to be public about their art, be it drawing or singing or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they'll post anonymously, but then you also get trolls.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So I think it's important to approach social media and artificial intelligence and technological developments almost, I mean, we don't need to like anthropomorphize it, but we need to stop looking at it as like a thing that serves us.
Yes.
Because these things, it's already out of our hands. Like, we can't control
Right.
how AI is going to develop.
Yeah.
We can't control, like, once one thing starts, that's it. And then it takes on its own life, you know?
Yeah.
So I think unless you're like, you know, some programming genius or like Elon Musk who has enough money and resources to control anything that he wants. Yeah. I'm obsessed with Elon Musk, but that's a side note. Like, for an average person like me, I think it really benefits me to look at social media as like another person in my life. And just like any person, you need boundaries.
Yes.
You need like to have closure. You need to understand the temperament. You need to understand when to interact with that person, when not to interact with that person, what that person can provide in a relationship, what they can't. And then you don't, you know, set yourself up for like, well, I just posted it. It's like nothing. It's like, no, it's not nothing.
Yes, it is something. That's why we posted it.
Exactly.
It's funny because you talk about Elon Musk. I was watching one of his interviews and...
Which one? I low-key have a crush on him.
Really?
Yes.
So I'm really not sure which one exactly, but I think he was in Shanghai with Jack Ma and they were having a conversation. And he was saying that how today mobile phones have become an extension of us. It's like having an extra limb. You know, you will not go without a cell phone. So similarly, I feel that when he said that, I was like, if you're not there on Instagram, if you're not there on Facebook, people tend to say, oh, but you even exist. So in order to exist these days, this has become one of the criterias. You know, like how you have an identification card or something. Definitely. This has become one of it. You know, so
I remember at the beginning of quarantine, I read this incredible essay, which like is so niche and obscure. I've never met anyone who's read it. If you've read it, hit me up. It's called the Cyborg Manifesto. It was written in 1985 by Donna Haraway, if I'm not mistaken. And it's basically like a socialist feminist perspective at artificial intelligence and technology in the late 21st century. We're in the 20th century.
We're in the 20th
century.
Yes.
And it explores like, what does it mean to be a cyborg? What will technological advancements mean for, you know, South Asian factory workers, right? Particularly women, of women in Yemen, of women in Africa, women in America. Like how will this either benefit or disrupt what we consider to be acceptable life? And like, it really got me thinking, we're technically already cyborgs. We technically already have
yes, absolutely.
Technological, artificial intelligence extension of who we are, right? Like, what if we all die, right? Our generation of people are dead. It's like 100,000 years in the future. Our like digital footprint still exists. And who's to say that like it's just gonna float around? Like, we don't know what's going on, and we don't know how things are gonna develop, and so I think it's really important that we're more mindful of our digital footprint. We're more mindful of the comments that we post, because that's feeding right, all these algorithms. Like, have you ever tried that, like, Ask Google? And the more that people use it, the more intelligent
they get.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
it gets.
Like, what are we feeding the internet?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's even, in fact, this very morning, after my meditation, I thought about it that every week I'm posting content. We put stories, we make reels. There's so much content out there. And, there is a universal saying that nothing is created and nothing is destroyed. Yeah. So what will happen to all this material that we're letting out? On an average, I do not know the exact numbers, but I personally, on an average, in a week, I at least have, say, maybe 20 stories. And at least I have minimum 3 posts. So that's me alone. Yeah. And there are people who are running businesses just on this. So imagine the amount of content chaos.
Yeah.
And as you rightly said about the digital footprint that we will be leaving behind. Yeah. So maybe after like how, these days we find forts, caves,
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So maybe people will find and they'll be like, exactly. And they would be like, oh, okay, this is what our ancestors did, made TikTok and Reels. So I really do not know how the future of technology is. But that's a different subject. I think we need to have another podcast for that.
I wouldn't say no.
Yeah, that's great. I would want to know, because you did mention about you studying law in Ohio.
Or on track for law, yeah.
Yeah, on track. Yeah. Sorry?
I wasn't in law school.
You were in law school.
I wasn't.
You weren't. No. Okay.
I was on track.
You were on track. Yeah. But you were doing that for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So you were pursuing law for 2 years in Ohio, and you got scholarship. Yeah. And then you applied to Berklee to see whether you can get in. And God's grace, you got it.
Yeah.
It's a very tough decision to make. To let go of your 2 years of investment, give up on the scholarship, go for something new. And the culture that we come from, because I'm Indian, you're, half Indian, and you live in the Arab world, our families, I wouldn't say all, but mostly the mindset is, go for law.
Yeah.
Why do you want to play an instrument, So was it a choice, like, because you were so headstrong and you said, no, I've got through here, I need to go, leave law? Or was it something that took a lot of effort to come to this conclusion?
Definitely. Like, on my dad's side, they originated from India and moved to Oman like 100 years ago, probably.
Ooh.
And they, particularly the men, obviously, were all very educated. Like, my grandfather spoke like
7 languages.
Something like that. Like, he worked in the Ministry of Finance and then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he represented Oman in the UN in the 1970s.
Wow.
Like, really established man, And then all of my dad and his uncle and his brothers, were all incredibly educated. Like, there was a lot of emphasis on that in our family, and there's so many reasons for that, like the whole post-colonial. How people thought and all of that. Okay. And then, so I think that was something that they brought with them when they immigrated. This emphasis on education, right? Because that can't be taken away from you.
Of course, yeah.
The women in my family, some really pursued, I have one aunt who has a PhD.
Wow.
Some aunts pursued more of a domestic life. So there's a bit more spread out there. But I think because of all of that, my dad thought it was really important that I be educated. And that was really important to him my whole life. He really pushed for it and was really supportive of anything academic. And then I started playing oud. I'd wanted to play since I was 3 years old. I'd been asking and bugging, and I used to make friends with those kids at school that would complain about their instrument classes, or they're like, oh, I have to practice piano an hour a day, and I'm like, you lucky. So I'd make friends with them and I'd come over so I could play their instruments. Once they caught on, I stopped getting invited. Finally, when I was 15, I got my hands on oud, and that was it. So at first my dad is like, okay, cool, Sultan Qaboos plays oud, that's okay, right? Because Sultan Qaboos did it, it's all right.
Yeah.
Allah yarhamu. But like, then I started getting really serious, and I started playing with Diwan, and I started playing all this. And he's like, it's not affecting your school, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's fine. And it was fine. So he let me continue. And then I got to the States, and I'm like playing all the time. And he's like, is it affecting your school? And I'm like, no, it's fine. He's like, okay. And then I got recruited by my teacher at Berklee, Simon Shaheen, a living master.
Yes, indeed.
My dad, he was not cool. He's like, there's no way that you're going to a city by yourself to study music when you have a scholarship for this. And like, oh my God. And I was like, oh crap, you know? So then I spoke with Simon, and he's like, well, let's see what we can do. He needs to come around. So then we spoke with him, and my dad, it's honestly a testament to how much he trusts me.
Wow.
And how much he believes in me, that he came around, and he's become incredibly supportive. And I'm really grateful for that. My mom has always been so cool. She's always been so cool. Like, she would drive me to all of my concerts, all of my rehearsals, all of my lessons. She knew all of the musicians that I was working with. She knew all my teachers.
Lovely.
She's been really cool about it. So when I made the decision, I was 19, right? And I still think that it's absurd to expect children to make these huge lifelong decisions,
yes.
right? And it's just this weird, like, higher education institution. It's just like, it's a disaster in my opinion. But anyway, so I made this choice at 19, and the way that I made it was, I basically have two options, and they're both incredible options. The track that I was going on for law was to focus on international human rights with an emphasis on women's rights in the Middle East. So that was what I was focusing on. And then obviously with Oud, I would be representing that anyway by nature of being a woman from the region. Like, I don't have a choice about it, right? Because the music industry, unfortunately, is not just purely about the art.
Yeah.
It's also about
where you come from
and
the image.
How you connect with the audience, and how you visually connect with the audience.
Absolutely.
Music isn't just about music anymore. Right?
Yeah, I understand.
And there's, again, parts of that that's really cool, parts of that are not so cool. But I understood that I basically have two options to do the same thing in different ways. And I think I mentioned this the first time that we spoke. I had this one professor, Jay Ashby, shout out Jay. He gave me some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my whole life. I think about it like every single day. I showed him my situation, my options, and he's like, oh, Ahmed, you seem like the type of person where these kinds of situations are going to keep happening to you. And he was spot on. Like, this is a great problem to have. You have two really fantastic options. You have the option to do two really great things. It's not so much what you choose. It's not so much the path if you choose law or music or whatever. It's more like the grace and integrity with how you carry yourself through making the decision and then committing to that decision.
Right.
And I was just like, that's it. That's basically all there is to it.
Yes.
Because especially when two options are so similar. Right. So I thought about it and I talked to a lot of people, and I realized that unfortunately it's still unlikely that many women from the Gulf would be given the opportunity to be a professional musician. Right. While it would still be easier to be a lawyer. So I chose the path that I knew would be harder.
Yes.
In honor of all the women that I know and all of the women I hope to help. And also because, like, why not?
Why not
take the road?
Absolutely. And you're paving way for the future generation.
I hope so. I don't like to put that pressure on myself, but I hope it
don't put the pressure. But I'm just saying that because, as you said, why not take the road less traveled? So you're indeed paving the way, because the more people start walking on the road, when you go to the forest and the road's not taken, it starts, you get the road already paving the way. Yeah. You mentioned that you were working under the maestro. Simon Shaheen. Maestro, isn't he?
Yeah, that's his voice.
Yeah.
I have an alter ego where I just channel him.
So would you like to talk like him?
No.
We can continue with that. He's a male teacher.
Yeah.
And whatever I have seen of you, your performances, in most of the cases, you're the only female, and probably, if I would say, the youngest, because everyone else is like men, they look old and
they have all these
big beards, and you're like this, little kid over there. So I have spoken to a lot of women who have been in fields which are male dominated. It's not just your work colleagues, but who's teaching you, your managers, the entire jing bang. It's majorly male dominated. And I hear from women, like, although they're capable, they're amazing, but there are times when they tend to doubt their own skills and talents. That's the imposter syndrome. That's what it's called. I would like to know, have you gone through something like that?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, heck yeah. I'm still exploring it. Last night was a particularly interesting night. I was digging through a lot of this. I think that it's based on the research that I've done on it and the people that I've talked to and the stories that I've heard, it's like it's experienced exponentially more among female populations. And I can't help but think that has something to do with workplace environments, right? Or industry environments, and like how all of this functions. And it's not exclusive to the music industry. It's pretty bad in the music industry, but it's not exclusive. I would say that it's maybe even more present in like the traditional Arabic music scene. But definitely. I've definitely gone through it a lot.
How do you overcome it? Like, how did you overcome that?
I honestly think that, like, in some ways, the pandemic was a blessing in disguise, because I got a lot of space. Because I was living in Boston up until it hit. And then Arman is like, we're closing the borders. And I was like,
pack my bags.
Exactly.
I'm here.
Like, half of my stuff is still in Boston, you know? So, I came back, I got a lot of space, I did a lot of reflecting, and I noticed that so much of these anxieties and these negative thoughts and these concerns and these fears were not as present, and that may have a lot to do with just not being in the same environment anymore. But also I did a lot of reading. I spoke to a therapist, and everyone should see a therapist. It's fantastic. Mental health is so important. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So I started seeing a therapist. I started talking to all my female friends about this. And because I used to be with guys all the time. Like, I was in class with them all day, right? I was working with them all night. All of my concerts with dudes, like, all my friends just happen to be guys because class and work. And like, then you just spend all this time. And it just, like, not to say that it like is a toxic thing, but I think an extreme of anything can be toxic. And I had like no balance in my life in that respect. And so I think that exacerbated the issue a lot. So getting that space, really emphasizing, really emphasizing cultivating strong female relationships really helped. And then just kind of reflecting and going through my history as a musician, as an artist, as an individual, and finding better ways to reframe how I thought about my own work was also really useful. Yeah. Because I think when all of your authority figures and everyone that you're looking up to and everyone that's instructing you and telling you like, no, this is right, this is wrong, which in music can be objective, like this note is not tuned, right? Or like you're going too fast. Like these are objective things. But then when it comes to taste, and so much of music is taste, then it's completely subjective.
Yeah.
And, you know, to be directed or pushed or encouraged or even bullied to go in one direction. Not to say that any one individual did this, but it's just like a collective, like, oh no, we like this music. So you naturally listen to that music.
Yes.
You know, but it's like, I don't want to be like a classical artist. Like I want to be like a weird, like Bjork type, you know? Like, so I think the best thing for me was the space. Right. But I'm sure that it's gonna come up in different phases of my life, depending on where I live, depending on what's going on in my career, what's going on in my personal life, and just being conscious of it, like finding a balance, having a good support system is really important.
Yeah. And I think such things are a daily effort.
Yeah.
Because I believe that we're all work in progress. Yeah. And every day we have to, like, it cannot be like you have one medicine and you're off the problem.
Yeah.
You know, and especially to do with mental health and such things, it's a constant effort. There are some days you'd feel awesome, but there are some days where you just feel like, okay, I'm giving in too much. Yeah. You're such a blend, right? Because you were saying in the beginning as well, and even with your music, you're trying to bring in so many different elements. Your mom is Colombian-American. Your dad is Indo-Omani. So I'm sure you have a lot of perspective in general because you've seen so many different cultures and you've lived in different places. So you have that perspective. I also believe that at a micro level, exclusivity exists and it will always exist. But at a macro level, I feel it has to be more inclusive when it comes to music, when it comes to cultures. These days, if you say the globe, you know, everybody can go anywhere. And there is so much mix of cultures, mix of languages, mix of thinking. I would like to know from you, because you're the youth of the nation and, you know, you have so much to contribute as well. What do you think of inclusiveness as a broader perspective and how it can, you know, actually, I just want to talk about the benefits that inclusivity brings. Inclusiveness brings.
I could approach this in so many ways. I mean, to start off, like, I don't approach my diversity in an analytical way, right? I don't reverse engineer it and try and break it apart. And it's like, oh, I get this part of my personality from this and like whatever. I think that's a common approach for people who aren't as mixed or who find someone as mixed as me to be more of a novelty. They will start to, you know, reverse engineer it and try and break it apart because if something's a novelty to you, that's what you do, right? And I think that's what it comes down to. It's like if I come across something that's really new and I just have like no basis to understand it, I'm going to approach it in a way that isn't sustainable, right? It's not sustainable to pick apart and try and reverse engineer everything about a circumstance. At some point, we have to just accept it. We have to acknowledge it. We have to embrace it. We have to nurture it. We have to ask the thing that we're analyzing what it needs, right? And I think that's really important to fostering a healthy, diverse society. Because you can have diverse societies that are not healthy. Right? Like I'm seeing a lot of that in the United States. I'm seeing a lot of that in the United States with the hate crimes against Asian Americans, with how African Americans are being treated on the daily, like how, you know, Americans of South Asian ancestry are like really quiet because they're scared because they're like, are we next? You know, and so you have all of these different minority groups that like aren't really unified because they're all going through their own isolated experiences. Like that's not a healthy, diverse society.
That's true.
Now, Oman, for example, is so much smaller. Like, what are we, like 4.5 million people? Like, it's
nothing.
It's a throwaway number. Like, what is that? You know? But an incredibly diverse society. Like even just looking at the local population, it's so diverse.
Yeah.
And I think for a long time, that's something that hasn't been in the conversation, but people of my generation are starting to talk about it. People are starting to have these discussions on social media. And I think that that's so powerful.
Yeah.
I think it's so dangerous to underestimate the power of acknowledgement and to underestimate the power of like being visible. Like seeing someone wwho looks like you matters.
Yeah.
Seeing someone that you identify with matters.
Yes. Yeah.
And to not have those role models, like I never had female oud player role models. Like it changes who you become.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think diversity is always great, but I think we're beyond that. We're beyond that conversation. I think the conversation we should be having is how can we create healthy, sustainable diversity?
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. That's amazing. So healthy, sustainable diversity. I think that should be the way forward for every nation, for the entire world.
Yeah, definitely.
And
it's not easy.
It's not easy.
By no
No,
means.
of course, it's not easy. And even at home, you know, if you have too many, because you come from a multicultural background as well, there is so much, I wouldn't say major conflict, but it does come because one's way of dealing with things would be different than the other. And that leads to some sort of disagreements. Yeah. And that's what's happening around the world, you know, when people say, oh, but this is not how we do it. Yeah. And then it says like, but you do it this way and we do it this way. That's mean you're already creating that wall, you know, you're dividing. Yeah. So I think what you said is an incredible point, and we need to have a healthy diversity. I mean, thank you so much, because that's given me more perspective. I was not looking at it this way. And with inclusiveness, how can we contribute to the nation? Because there is so much that we, the expat population, can give back. Yeah. How can we felicitate in the growth of the country, not just by being, okay, we're making our money over here. And of course, now there are more opportunities to invest. That's so much money, please, market and stuff. Whatever, you know, God's grace, whatever we need. My education has come from this country. My dad has lived here throughout. So everything that I own today is because of this country. And of course, because there is hard work. We are putting in effort, you know, but the country is giving us that kind of support and opportunities. But I just still want to see that how can I give back? Because now I have taken so much, I've been blessed with so much support from this country. How can we put our energies to use to develop this country in another way? Not just take from here, but to give back. So I was just looking at, you know, maybe something, a sustainable solution, even for expats and the other population to do more community service, to give back to the country. So in my head, I was looking at it.
Is that what inspired this podcast?
Actually, it got inspired last year because of the pandemic. And I'm completing 1 year. Your Human is going to complete 1 year, guys. I think when we release this episode, it had already celebrated 1 year because it's day after tomorrow on 29th of May. I was looking at a lot of people on social media saying that how 2020 should be cancelled, how they're feeling depressed, how you know, they're losing meaning in life, and how they're feeling so challenged and so pushed and so suffocated. Of course, we were all going through the same emotions, more or less, you know, but the intensity would vary, but more or less we all have felt it, you know, at different levels. So I thought, why not, you know, create a platform where I learn something from another individual and boost up my, you know, motivation. Because everybody has challenges, you know, that they go through. And how can I learn? You know, not the only one who's going through bad times. There are other people too. So how can I learn from them and from their experiences and, you know, from their spirit? And I think we human beings have so much power and so much potential, and we're not utilizing it to the fullest. So yeah, that's how the podcast came by. And I've been so blessed to have such amazing, incredible people, you know, souls on this podcast. And believe me, from each one I take something, you know, from each one I learn, you know, and I was like, oh, from this person I learned this. And my life, if I would have to say, in this past 1 year, I personally can look back and say I have evolved as a soul.
That's awesome.
So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that something like this podcast is contributing to Omani society. Like, obviously giving platforms for voices, but also like fostering, like, you have like such a genuine like curiosity that's like infectious. And I think that sharing that on a platform is also a way of contributing back to society. So
there you go. You've given me my answer. Honestly, because this is something that has been playing in my mind for weeks now. That how can I give back? How can I do my part to give back to this country? And thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm actually having a very emotional moment at the moment because I found the answer. No, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you so much for being here. Guys, this is Amal. For us, for all of us. I think Amal is a gift, a very big gift to the world from Oman for the music scene. Yes, that's number one. And I think as a young mind, because the way you are, the way you think, it's incredible. So guys, that's Amal for you and for the rest of the world to benefit from in a lot of ways. So thank you so much. Thank you. And I wish you all the luck in your music scene, in your writing scene, and anything that you do. And I think you are so authentic in the real way and sincere in the real way. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for watching yet another episode of You Are Human. Thank you so much for all the time that you've given. I am so grateful. So grateful for all of you. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If it has inspired you, even slightly, then please like, share, and comment. See you on the next one. Until then, remember, our time is limited. Let's make the most of it.
Hi, my name is Amal Waqar, and you're watching me on You Are Human. Like, comment, and subscribe, please.
Keep watching You Are Human on YouTube and listen to these amazing conversations on Spotify and other audio platforms.